Hey, old good everyone. Twisty here with Open Sorcery, and today I want to go ahead and talk about Astragalomancy, which is dice divination, to put it simply. Now, before getting into the practice in of itself, or at least sharing the manner in which I go about it, generally speaking, time to go into a little bit of a background in the sense of what Astragalomancy is a part of in the realm of divinatory categories and such. So, Astragalomancy is a manner of casting lots, which are any types of practices where a random selection is made. So, when it comes to, say, there being lotteries, that's where the name comes from, is casting lots. So when you go ahead and buy those scratch off tickets, from the machines at, a convenience store or at, say a grocery store, or if you happen to enter a state lottery for trying to win millions or however much amount of money, that's where that particular etymology comes from, is the practice of casting lots, randomized pickings, and such. Thus, the category of divinatory practice that Astragalomancy falls under happens to be called cleromancy or sortilege, which happen to encompass any manners of divination where objects are thrown to produce seemingly random selections. Even though, if you're going ahead and doing it in a divinatory manner, you're likely trying to get communication from the divine or insight into whatever sort of manners and means and, situations that you're happening to throw the dice for and such, and using them as a medium for it. So, when it comes to going ahead and giving a summary of Astragalomancy, right? This comes from a particular paper that is freely available, if you go ahead and search for it, called Divination Systems, which is a UMS course, and I believe UMS stands for the University of Metaphysical Sciences, and I could be incorrect on that, because it's been a while since I went ahead and checked out their materials, but outside of getting this particular paragraph. However, I will go ahead and read this excerpt about Astragalomancy because the paper overall didn't expressly or go in depth into Astragalomancy, but gave a quick summary for those interested in having a very generalized knowledge of a variety of different divinatory systems. Nevertheless, Astragalomancy. This form uses knuckle bones or dice. The name derives from a small four-sided bone found in the tarsal joint of hooved animals called the astragal. Using knuckle bones or dice is most likely the oldest game known to humankind. Dice that closely resemble those of today have been found in Egyptian tombs of 2000 BCE, which stands for Before Common Era, or you may know it as BC before Christ, in terms of categorizing time periods centered around the birth of Christ, and or just, a distinction of when numbers started, were decreasing in our calculation of history, and then they began increasing and such. But nevertheless, the dice or bones will be marked on each side with symbols, or more often with letters of an alphabet. The diviner would cast the dice, then predict the future by interpreting the symbols showing on the dice. Consequently, there would be a very wide range of predictions depending on what was printed on them. So, as it states there in that summary, there could be a wide range of interpretations, predictions, and manners of, what these happen to mean, what these castings, these manners of divination happen to entail. But when it comes to, generally speaking, odds, if you're looking for a yes or no answer, I should say, odds tend to happen to be no, and evens tend to be yes, if you're just putting it very simply for a yes or no answer. However, if you are looking to possibly allow maybe answers, those would generally be when doubles are happening to be cast from two or more dice, depending on however many you happen to be utilizing in your readings and such, whether it be a 6-sided die or 12-sided die or a D20 sort of die that happens to be popularly associated with Dungeons and Dragons or other games. But yes, so that tends to be how a lot of people generally use dice divination. However, I want to go ahead and share the particular method in which I happen to do it myself. So, with that, I go along with the method of the Tibetan Buddhist Mo divination. Mo divination. Now, that happens to be when you go ahead and you cast 2 dice, and they happen to result 1 out of 36 possible results. Now, the thing is, though, the dice that they utilize happen to have characters and syllables from the Tibetan language itself. And those happen to be having dice that are associated with syllables for the mantra for one of the Tibetan Buddhist deities of Manjushri. So the particular mantra happens to go Arapazanadi. Now, when it comes to equating that to just general numbers and such, A equates to 6, Ra equates to 2, Pa equates to 3, Za equates to 5, Na equates to 4, and D equates to 1. And when it comes to that manner, I may not have pronounced it properly, but that is just how I know it in terms of how I've read it and understanding it with my own Western manner of speaking and pronunciation. However, when it comes to utilizing this, right? So this is the general basic method of how you do it. In throwing 2 dice, each will have a side facing up after it's thrown, and then whichever number it is, you then convert it to the syllable used in the Mo system, and then you'll have a 2-syllable result. Then there is a particular text that happens to be available called Mo Tibetan Divination System by Jamgon Mifam, and also attributed to His Holiness Sakya Treason, and is translated by a writer named J. Goldberg into English. And using that text as a reference, you'll have your result out of the 36 available ones, each with its own interpretation, not just for, in general, but for a variety of different situations that it may go ahead and be applicable to, depending on your intent, or, just a variety of things for you to mull over of what it could, go ahead and have to do with, even if you aren't specifically looking or intending to have a question answered. So, that being said, right, for example, right, if you get a double 6, right, you go ahead and look in the text, and it would be ah. Or if you go ahead and say, I don't know, you get a 3 and a 5, then you go ahead and look for the result that equates to Pa and Za. Now, in having done it before, I myself have found it rather accurate and a very quality means of going about utilizing dice and such. Along with that, I'll also go ahead and share that you can also bolster the clarity of your readings using dice or any other divinatory medium, honestly, and going ahead and invoking different entities and beings to preside and govern over your readings and such, to once again add a little bit more accuracy, add a little more potency to what you're doing. So, I personally recommend going ahead and calling upon Archangel Uriel or Archangel Raziel in helping to increase that accuracy and such. And especially during times of Mercury retrograde or any other sort of astrological, fucky-wuckiness, to say that the least, going ahead and having that extra manner can really go ahead and help out. But when it comes to the Mo Tibetan dice divination system itself, if you're wanting to go ahead and get particular assistance, and if Buddhism or Eastern, religions or manners of spirituality tend to be more so your flavor, then you can go ahead and invoke Manjushri through some sort of mantra, whether it be the particular mantra that the system is associated with of Arapazanadi, or through some other mantras associated through whatever manner of independent study you happen to do for Manjushri, or whatever manners or means that you happen to invoke or call upon entities through prayer or what have you. Nevertheless, if you want a more different system, a more westernized system, or just something that may go ahead and click with you better, because I don't know, we're all individuals, we have our own manners going about things. One way, or at least one reference, I should say, to go ahead and look into is the Little Giant Encyclopedia of Fortune Telling by the Diagram Group. And in that particular text, they have a section on dice divination, as well as other divinatory mediums and systems and such, that you can go ahead and use as a reference point. For, I believe in that particular text, it's more so for using 3 dice as a manner and means of getting results, as opposed to 2, as I've gone ahead and talked about and presented. But it is up to you as the reader, as the interpreter, as what is intuitively appropriate for you to go ahead and do, what feels best, what feels, the right way to go. And of course, there are other means and manners of using dice as a medium and other manners of interpretation, but those are just some particular directions and me serving as a guidepost for anyone who happens to be interested in taking up Astragalomancy, or, generally known as dice divination. So, I think I went ahead and covered all I wanted to do in presenting this. So, that having been said, this has been Twisted with Open Sorcery, and stay frosty, nigguses. Peace.